has done a lot of work on education. This is one of the two most important challenges facing this country. Unless we can improve the quality of schooling for the vast majority of South Africans, we will continue to struggle to be a successful country, and millions of people's lives will be destroyed by the very poor quality of schooling. Now, fixing the public schooling system is an enormous challenge. It's probably the largest management challenge the country faces. It dwarfs the management challenges our mining companies or any of our big companies face. If you think of the number of people involved, over 400,000 educators, some 26,500 schools, parents, pupils, this is an enormous management challenge. And we have looked at how the country can learn from systemic reform of schooling systems in other developing countries like Brazil or India. The more interesting thing, I think, is a growing dynamic that is a worldwide phenomenon where private schools for the poor are emerging. Now, many people assume that these are fly-by-nights or crooks. In fact, nothing could be further from the truth. Of course, like any sector, there are some unsavory individuals operating, but the vast majority of these private schools across the world are started in local communities by local people, and they often grow organically. So a good teacher is asked to start a school, and if she does well, the parents say, well, let's go to the next level, and why don't you expand? And the next thing you know, you have an independent school operating. Many people thought there were none of these schools in South Africa, or very few, as to be uninteresting. But as we learnt of other developing countries where the majority of children are now in private schools for the poor, in a number of countries in Latin America, Chile, Colombia, and elsewhere. In India, this is certainly the case. In a number of African countries, the numbers are growing dramatically. And so we did an enormous study looking at what was happening in South Africa, and we found that some 15% of the schools in 6 very large districts, urban and rural in the country, involved private schools for the poor. And more private schools had been set up in these communities than public schools since we became a democracy. Overall, the quality in these schools is equivalent to the public school across the road or better. What's very exciting now is that the South African private sector is starting to move downwards, and they're getting involved and bringing their expertise and organizational and managerial abilities into creating new schools for poorer people. Not St. John's, but going much lower in the market, around 1,000 rand per month per pupil. You can still go lower, but private money, state money from the Public Investment Corporation, from Old Mutual, and from private investors is going into starting new schools and new chains of schools. And this is very exciting, because the way you're going to drive up the quality of schooling in these private schools for poorer communities and poorer parents is through developing brands, economizing. Not every school needs a maths teacher. You can have a maths teaching service. Not every school needs a secretary or an administrative department. You can share those expenses. So there's all sorts of exciting innovations that can take place that I think will rather quickly expand dramatically and is going to revolutionize South African schooling.